Hey, before we get into the video, I would like to thank some Patreons who contributed to the channel. Ozzy Zero, Worst Spy TF2, Thomas Haynes, James Westbrook Jr., Tulip Mango, Extreme Xavier 15, EveBot007, Soup for Days, Silent, and Emerald Henry. Thank you all for contributing to the channel. Patreon link is in the description to help support the channel. Anything helps, and you'll be eligible for benefits based on any amount you give. This is a video idea that has been in the making for a long time. I originally did a poll on my channel about a year ago now, voting on what my next what if would be, but I was worried this what if would take too long and I was struggling with getting videos out, so I put it on the back burner for a while. Sorry about that, but we're finally getting to it. The title for this what if I think is a bit non-specific, so I've tried my best to specifically lay out what changes I'm going to be making to Trent in this what if compared to what we saw in the original action. Essentially, the main changes I'm going to be making are the things that I think represent his derailment from Island the most. Firstly, the 9 obsession. I don't have an issue with the OCD representation, but when it's used to specifically point out and shame a character for being weird about it, it's unneeded. Also, the story of his OCD being from a train tour that his dead grandfather gave him doesn't make any sense for him to suddenly show the obsession now, because he competed last season and he didn't show any obsession with the number 9. Basically suggesting that Trent just didn't give a shit about his dead grandpa in season 1, and that also feels out of line for Trent's character. Second change, how quickly he got jealous of Duncan and Gwen. The fact that literally their first moment of bonding was just them sharing love for alien movies, and that was enough to make Trent already begin to show jealousy is extremely out of character for the cool, easygoing, chillax guy was shown to be in season 1. Lastly, relating pretty closely to the second point, Trent is not going to be so insecure about his romantic relationship with Gwen. This isn't voided of ever potentially happening. If it does, it will be from a more substantial build-up, because in the original, it really comes out of nowhere within just a couple of episodes, where Gwen gave him no reason to even be concerned. Nothing changes that much story-wise for the first 2 episodes. Only thing worth noting is that Trent obviously wouldn't be as weird with the bonding of Gwen and Duncan in the alien episode. I do still think he'd be a little put off by them, because I don't think Trent likes the kind of person Duncan is, and isn't sure how to feel about Gwen associating with him, given the cruel nature Duncan's shown in the past, but all of that is just confessional stuff, and he's still able to normally interact with the two. The first big change where we're going to start for this what if is the team picking phase. Originally, when Gwen picked Duncan, Trent was so insecure about her picking him that he picked Lindsay to call her beautiful to try and make Gwen jealous back. Now that he isn't being that jealous and insecure, he'd actually pick a girl who he thinks would be good for his team. And that's not to say that I think Lindsay would be bad, but out of the options, it's very clear that Lashana would be his number 1 pick. She has a physical strength, he has a good personal connection with her. There is some iffiness pertaining to Lashana being the one who rallied the troops to get Trent voted out last season. However, Trent would definitely understand the murkiness of the situation because, kids have heard it looks like he cheated on Gwen. So he actually probably likes Lashana even more for doing that because it showed that she sticked up for Gwen. Gwen has to pick a girl next, and now without Lashana to choose, she'd have to take someone else. The options for these girls really aren't great for Gwen. Originally, the next girl after Lashana was Heather, but that was because Lashana convinced Gwen to keep her enemies closer. So without Lashana to influence that choice, I don't see Gwen's brain going there. She's always had a bit of a grudge against Lindsay for being the inverse of her, the pretty popular girl, and also working with Heather last season to assist her, and that Trent trickery probably doesn't help. Izzy isn't the worst option for challenge strength, but I believe Gwen would choose Beth. Gwen would respect Beth for turning on Heather so early last season. Beth is not really Gwen's kind of person. Out of the options though, she's clearly the most appealing. Trent has to pick a guy next, and originally he speaks very poorly on both Harold and Owen's challenge ability, so they are out of the running for this pick. DJ and Justin, both who sound like great options. I think he'd end up leaning Justin, because even though the Lindsay pick was purely out of spite, the Justin pick that he explains afterwards as getting pretty people for the acting challenges does actually make sense, and can be thought through for season 1 personality, because being a guitar player, he'd know the importance of charisma and stage presence for performances. Also, Justin would use great moral support for the team, especially Lashana probably advocating for him because he's hot and everyone likes him. Gwen picks a guy. Again, Harold and Owen weren't the most desired, and DJ is a brickhouse for challenges, so she'd obviously pick him. Trent's next girl pick I could see being influenced by Lashana, like Gwen's was to choose Heather to keep your enemies closer. Trent is a bit unsure because he isn't as close to Lashana to trust her on that so quickly, but Lashana also points out that if he chooses Heather, then he's saving Gwen the burden of having Heather on her team, and that's the sort of selfless and kind thing that Trent would want to be able to do for Gwen, so he concedes and picks Heather. Gwen picks a girl next, and again, isn't a huge fan of Lindsay, and even though Gwen probably isn't also a big fan of Izzy, she's at least helpful for challenges, so Gwen would choose her. Trent makes the choice between Owen and Harold. I briefly considered if Lashana would influence his choice towards Harold, because Lashana is closer to Harold, but in the original, Lashana didn't really make similar efforts towards Gwen to choose Harold, and Lashana was much closer to Gwen, so if she wasn't willing to insert that idea towards Gwen, I doubt she'd be willing to do it towards Trent, meaning Trent would still find Owen to be more useful than Harold, because he won the last season. Both Harold and Lindsay are added on to the other teams as the only options. The first part of the challenge, with teams having to unload set equipment up on the stage on the mountain, would still play out the same, with Owen pulling up the trailer for the grips and winning this part of the challenge for them. This gives the grips the advantage of the trailer to help with setting up their scene, which the gaffers now lack. The grips still have to choose an actor for the old lady, and now with how Izzy here to immediately take the spot, it's between Lashana, Lindsay, and Heather. I couldn't see any of them choosing to take this role because they all have a level of spotlight, charm, and ability, but I think Heather and Lindsay would find more offense in playing an old lady, not seeing as a luxurious role, where Lashana I don't think would be bothered by that as much. Any feelings she might have of that, I think she'd be able to push aside to take the spotlight as an actor, which I think she'd thrive in. The gaffers still choose Duncan as their thug actor, since they required a male actor, and the male options are still the same for this team. I could see Izzy being interested in this thug role, but I don't think she'd push as hard as she did for the old lady, and even if something happened where maybe they relented it to her, reading the sappy lines because the scripts got switched and, the thug's playing a nice old lady talking about her sheeps, so once Izzy reads those lines, she'd get bored of the character and throw it onto Duncan either way. Heather still gets caught by the leg of a wire and hangs upside down. Now, since she's on a different team to Harold, he wouldn't be able to help her down, and because the roles the members of this team played in creating the set originally would still be the same, and Justin is the only one we didn't see on stage consistently, he would be the one to find Heather hanging upside down. This creates a unique opportunity for Justin, because coming into the season he was ready to play dirty, and Heather is definitely someone that could help Justin in doing that. However, there's a couple issues in the way of this happening. I don't really know if Justin is smart enough to think of this, since he's hardly seen to really be the strategic type, especially in a long-term way like this. And Justin is very vain, and the idea of working with the person who got him eliminated so early sounds like a hurdle that would be hard for him to overlook. But I think both of these are amendable for this to still happen. For the first point, while Justin does have very poor or lacking strategic moments, early on especially, he was at least pretty decent with strategic play, showing things like the Gwen blackmail, the buttering up to Beth and Lindsay to use them in challenges, and a large part of Justin's strategy was to use his good looks to get people on his side to do the hard work for him. So even though I don't think he's the smartest strategist, I do believe he's smart enough to see the value in working with Heather. And for the second point, I do think it would make it tougher for Justin, but at the end of the day, Heather is already humbled. She lost her hair, basically everyone hates her. I think this hurdle would be a lot more impassable for Justin if Heather was still high and mighty. Her this low and disrespected by everyone, I don't think he would feel sympathy for her, but I do think he'd feel pity, where he wouldn't be mad enough at her in this state to not try working with her, having seen the aforementioned value. So he talks with Heather about working together, lets her down, and Heather has a confessional following this, happy that someone finally sees her worth and isn't being so stuck up about last season. Lashana and Duncan both begin their acting scenes. Lashana would actually do really well at being hard and assertive with the delinquent lines, but Duncan's performance was far too beautiful, and Chef still allianced himself with DJ, where he alluded to crying for his team for their alliance, so the gaffers still win. Looking at the vote for the grips, it's pretty obvious that Heather is in trouble. The only consideration that could save her is Justin. Heather goes to talk with Justin about how she's worried the votes are on her, and she needs him to help switch the vote. Justin tells her to not worry about it and let him do his magic. Heather's pleased with that decision and walks off to give Justin time to switch the vote. The thing is, Justin wouldn't be willing to try and save Heather here. The reason why I say that is because the team structure of people is just way too anti-Heather. Trent, Lashana would be impossible to convince of Heather. Lindsay, I think, could happen with Justin's charm, but it would still be very hard to have her not vote Heather. Owen is the only one that seems pretty easily swayable, with his constant fear of Heather shown on Island, and admiration of Justin's beauty. Beginning anyone else looks like an extremely difficult task that I don't think Justin would be willing to attempt. Especially not attempt when it would be for Heather. As previously stated, he still does hold a lot of resentment towards for getting him eliminated last season. And like I said before, for his strategy coming into action, definitely hinges a lot on him using his good looks to disarm people into not seeing him as a threat and sway them into doing things for him. But if he were to save Heather here, he would blow up that cover, as people see he would have had a hand in helping Heather not get eliminated. It's just too large of a risk to his strategy, and it's a risk for someone that Justin doesn't particularly like. In a 5-1 vote with Lashana and Heather in the bottom two, Heather looks extremely smug as Chris is about to hand out the last statue, but her smirk drops when Chris tosses it to Lashana. She looks over to Justin, seeing his grin, and realizes he double-crossed her. As she's getting dragged to the limo, she informs the team that Justin was trying to work with her, and he's a snake. People turn their attention to Justin, and he tells everyone that he never had any intention of actually working with her. He just told her that so she wouldn't try any scheming. That good reasoning, combined with his pretty smile, charms everyone into thinking that he was just trying to ensure Heather's elimination, and they all praise him for the clever idea. Justin has a confessional admitting it would have been nice to have Heather help him with the strategy of this game, but she was more trouble than she was worth, and besides, with this move to start his game, he thinks he'll do just fine in the strategy department. There would be a small scene of Owen asking to talk with Izzy, since being on opposite teams, he's been struggling to find time to talk with her. And even though they weren't on the worst terms at the beginning of action before the teams were made, I still think they were a bit iffy, as Izzy was kind of ignoring Owen a lot, and she started having her crush on the big monster in the first episode, so that's probably still hanging somewhere in Owen's mind, and he just wants to do a brain check, see where they are. When he goes to talk to her, however, she insists they never dated because she's E-Scope, and this is their first time meeting. This leaves Owen even more confused on where they stand. Lindsay and Beth would still fawn over Justin, offering him their food. But now with Beth on the other team of Lindsay and Justin, Duncan notices the sucking up and pulls Beth aside to remind her that Justin and Lindsay are the enemy, and she'd be wise to stop being seen with them. Beth doesn't share the sentiment, saying no one's her enemy, and just because they are on different teams doesn't mean they can't hang out when not in challenges. Doesn't mean they can't hang out when they're not in challenges. Duncan remains firm and friends Beth a little, saying she can do whatever she wants, but he doubts the rest of the team will agree with her team harmony idea. This makes Beth panic a bit in confessional and realize that Duncan might have a point. Being so close to the other team might make her a target, and maybe she should consider distancing herself. Duncan still messes with Trent by undoing the lids to the salt and pepper, but now when Duncan eats a piece of Trent's eggs, he doesn't get all weird about there only being 8 pieces now. Instead, he just pushes the plate towards Duncan and storms out the mess tent. Trent has a confessional noting Duncan's childish antics and begins to wonder how Gwen is able to bond with him. Speaking of Gwen, she would confront Duncan for messing with Trent. Duncan tells her it's just some harmless fun. Besides, he's the leader of the other team, so she might want to learn to ease up on defending him. Gwen tells Duncan, on the other team or not, he's still her boyfriend, and she's not going to sit back and let Duncan mess with him, so as the leader of their team, she's ordering him to knock it off. Duncan's smirk falters, and he decides to drop it, agreeing to leave her alone. Duncan eyes Harold, saying besides, he has a different target in mind. This leads to Duncan having his confessional, explaining why he's mad at Harold for rigging the votes against Corey last season, and he plans to make Harold's time here twice as worse as he did last time. The first challenge result remains the same, with Duncan surviving the surfboard and seagull shots, winning the advantage for his team. The only new factor here is Izzy on the gaffers, who doesn't change anything. I could see her being able to dodge all the seagulls herself, but since she's on the team of Duncan, it doesn't really matter which two of them do it, the gaffers get the advantage anyways. However, during the challenge, there's some new things to talk about. Beth would begin talking more to her team and use some of the friendship bracelets she still made in this episode to begin trying to get to know her team better. Mainly DJ and Harold, because they were both people who weren't on her team last season, so she didn't really get a chance to meet them. Lindsay notices Beth handing out friendship bracelets and asks if she can have one. Beth panics, Duncan stares her down, making Beth have to lie to Lindsay that she would, it's just she's working on a really nice one just for her, so no. Lindsay can't have one. Lindsay is a little hurt but believes Beth and just tells Beth to let her know when she's finished because she would love to start planning her outfits to match the bracelet. Beth has a confessional feeling awful about lying to Lindsay, but she just needs some time to figure out how to let Lindsay down gently. The sand building challenge would play out similar to the original, although different in a couple ways. Without Trent being crazy about 9 on the grips, he wouldn't exceed the weight capacity on the castle by trying to add 9 shell flags, so they wouldn't have to rebuild. And when Lindsay still creates their team symbol on a crab shell as a flag, Justin would take time to compliment her craftiness, making Lindsay blush. Watching this scene unfold in front of him, Owen would realize Justin is like the charming master, and gets the idea to ask him for help with charming E-Scope, with charming Izzy, or rather E-Scope. The Grips castle wouldn't be great without Beth being there to come up with the plan to use a bunch of crafting materials to reinforce it, but I don't think it matters how good it is since the Gaffer's castle would still get knocked down by seagulls in the last minute, meaning the Grips win the sandcastle part, and Chris still forces a tiebreaker telling everyone to go collect sticks for a bonfire. During this collection of firewood, Owen would follow behind Justin, muttering to himself, thinking about how to ask him for help. Justin uncomfortably informs Owen that he can hear, and asks him what's on his mind. Owen stutters through asking Justin for some help with E-Scope. Justin reassures Owen that he doesn't need to worry about women's struggles because Justin is his guy. He'll gladly help him win the girl back. Justin has a confessional explaining this decision by saying Owen doesn't seem impressive on the surface, but he made it to the finale last time, so clearly he has something that Justin could benefit to use. If he manages to help him out with his woman problems, which are no issue for Justin, then Owen will be indebted to him, and Justin will gain a completely loyal ally that will do anything to pay him back. Trent also goes to talk with Gwen to catch up, and this time Gwen doesn't get scared off from Trent's collecting of 9 sticks, because he wouldn't be doing that, so they just have a nice conversation catching up together, bonding over being force team leaders and expressing missing each other. During this, Trent mentioned Duncan, asking her why she chose him first in the team picking. Gwen is confused, asking if that's a problem, and Trent says, kinda, Duncan is a major jerk. Gwen tells Trent she's allowed to pick whoever she wants to be on her team, and that jerk is what gave her team the win in the first challenge. Trent is annoyed by her rubbing in that victory and says he thought she was better than picking people like Duncan. Gwen now gets annoyed at that comment, pointing out that he chose Heather. It's not like he exactly made a team of saints himself. Trent tells Gwen that was Lashana's idea, and he only chose Heather so Gwen wouldn't have to deal with her. Gwen explains to Trent that she is more than capable of defending herself from Heather, and if what he ended up doing when manipulated by her last season, Gwen thinks she might have felt more comfortable with Heather on her team rather than his. Trent is shocked and asks if that means what he thinks it means, that Gwen doesn't trust him around Heather. Gwen, knowing she doesn't think that, and tells Trent of course not. However, he's not exactly the perfect nice guy all the time himself. Duncan can be a jerk, but he and Gwen get along. Trent scoffs and tells Gwen he's really happy for her then, joking that after the show, maybe Gwen can get matching broken needle tattoos in juvie, and storms away from her. Also during the firewood collection, Lindsay again approaches Beth and wants to collect firewood with her. Beth tries to let her down gently, that they shouldn't be seen together during a challenge, but Lindsay says it's fine since they aren't even really doing a challenge right now, they're just collecting wood. So they collect wood together, when Lindsay goes on and on about how she's been thinking about all the possibilities of how her friendship bracelet would look. Beth cracks under the guilt and admits to Lindsay she doesn't have a bracelet for Lindsay at all because they can't be friends while on opposite teams. Lindsay's smile disappears and she asks Beth what she means. Beth apologizes but restates that it's just too risky for them to be so close while on opposite teams and it could paint a target on them. Lindsay tears up a little, asking if this means they really aren't friends anymore. Beth begins to tear up a little too, saying not forever, but for now, it does. Lindsay says okay and walks off sniffling. Both her and Beth have confessionals on the matter, feeling very bad about this, yet Beth tells herself it had to be done. For the dance tiebreaker, it's a struggle to know if Trent or Lashana goes in for the grips, because Trent was originally suggested by Lindsay and Justin. Normally, I believe Lashana's assertiveness for herself would be enough to have Trent let her go in. However, seeing as he's annoyed at Gwen and he wants to stick it to her by beating her team, and he's the unofficial leader of the Grips since he chose the team, he would shoot down Lashana's request and go in himself. For the gaffers, it's definitely between Izzy and Harold. For the gaffers, it's definitely between Izzy and Harold. Gwen and Duncan aren't really dancers. Beth's in too bad of a mood after what she did with Lindsay to be a dancer. And DJ, as we saw on Island with the talent challenge, has some stage fright. I think Harold is definitely the better dancer of the two, but I also think Izzy would be way more pushy about being the dancer. And even if Harold pushed more, I don't think he would have the support of the team. Duncan doesn't like him, and everyone else would probably think he had his chance for the team in the stand building challenge, which he blew. So Trent and Izzy have a dance-off where I'm pretty sure Trent would win, since he did have pretty good rhythm before he threw this challenge. And Izzy's dances, from what we've seen on Island, are peculiar and don't really match the beach party theme. Trent continues dancing towards Gwen to rub it in her face a bit when he wins. Trent continues dancing towards Gwen to rub it in her face when he wins. During the beach party reward for the Grips, Justin notices Lindsay feeling down and goes to talk to her about it. Lindsay reveals that Beth unfriended her. Justin uses this opportunity to comfort Lindsay and reveals in a confessional after the fact that he was just comforting her to gain her loyalty and bring Lindsay into an alliance. The episode begins at night after the teams got back from the beach party. The Grips are in a significantly better mood than the gaffers for winning the reward, except for Lindsay, who's being rocked with Justin having his arm around her shoulder. Beth notices Lindsay's distress, and Justin eyes Beth down and shakes his head in disapproval at her. Beth herself gets sad from this, but upon seeing Gwen, a bulb flashes in her head. She figures that with Gwen having Trent on the other team, she probably wouldn't care that much about keeping the team separate, and she's kind of the team leader. So if Beth can get Gwen to disavow the teams being separate outside of challenges, then maybe she can be friends with Lindsay again. Beth catches up to Gwen before they walk into the trailer, mentioning that some people have been saying they can't interact with the other team at all. Gwen must agree that's silly because Trent's her boyfriend. Usually Gwen would probably agree because I don't think she cares that much about competition stuff. But since she just came off of having a little argument with Trent, she would actually support the idea of staying away from the other team. Beth is shocked and tries to explain it more to have Gwen change her mind, but Gwen shuts Beth up. She isn't in the mood. There's no discussion to be had about this. Morning comes and everyone is still suffering in the heat. Justin still has Owen fanning him for palm leaf, but this time Owen asks if this is to help him with Izzy somehow, and Justin quickly webs up a lie and saying, definitely, it will give him bicep definition to move those arms. Lashana's hair puffs up in the heat, and she talks with Trent, who's no longer hanging out with Gwen this morning. Lashana asks Trent about this, and finds out about the argument they are having and being more competitive. Being good friends with Gwen and liking Trent, Lashana thinks it's ridiculous that they're acting like this, but decides to stay out of it. Duncan would still mess with Harold when the challenge is being explained. Lashana notices this from the other team and wants to help out Harold, but is worried about being on the other team and Gwen going through with Trent, so the teams aren't really allowed to coexist at all. The Grips are told to have someone jump off the ladder onto the horse first because they won last time. Trent would still be feeling competitive in nature against Gwen, so he offers himself to go first. Trent's landing was not a result of him being more weird, so I believe he would still demolish the likelihood of his future bloodline when he lands crotch first on a wooden post. Gwen's expression at first floods of concern, but once Trent begins to walk back towards his team, showing he's okay, Gwen can't help but smile a tiny bit, being happy to see him put in his place after taunting her so much yesterday. Lashana notices the smile and is irate in confessional, saying Gwen is never one to take pleasure in someone's pain. Lashana renounces her earlier take of not getting involved because this is too much for her to sit back and watch. Gwen goes next for the gaffers and still lands on the horse, albeit by accident. While Gwen was climbing up the ladder, Owen asks Justin for advice on his move with Izzy. Justin tells him that when he goes for her turn up the ladder, look her in the eyes, say, hey, and give a wink. Justin then winks at Lindsay to prove his point, who immediately begins fawning over him. Justin then uses this influence to trick Lindsay into going next by talking about how a cowgirl in that steed would look absolutely gorgeous to him. Beth and Lindsay originally jumped together, so there's a chance that Lindsay's result would change here without having Beth to jump with her, but I don't really see how it would, so Lindsay gets the first point for the Grips. Izzy goes next for the gaffers after seeing how cool it looked when Lindsay landed. Owen tries Justin's advice while Izzy's going up the ladder. She quickly brushes Owen off, not impressed with his cheesy attempt at flirting. Justin has a confessional wondering how that couldn't have worked because it's always done wonders for him, not being aware that Owen doesn't have his extremely charming physical looks. Izzy was not here originally, however, this feels exactly like the type of agile stunt that she would excel at, so she gets a point for the gaffers. Owen goes next for the grips and gets them a point like the original. Harold lands a jump for the gaffers, and then Duncan lands on Harold, getting the gaffer both points. Lashana, DJ, and Justin all do their jumps from the original, with none of them getting points. Beth, similar to Lindsay, I don't know why her result in jumping would change, so she would still land on the horse for the gaffers, giving them a 2-point lead over the grips. It was never really made clear what teams would get for winning this first challenge, since neither team did originally, they both tied. But considering the next challenge, I think it's fair to say the advantage would be that the gaffers get to be the cowboys rounding up the other team as the cattle, since not only is that the easier task than avoid getting lassoed, wearing the cow udders on their heads is a form of disadvantage enough. Chris explains the next challenge. Owen still gets dressed up in his shirtless cowboy attire. Don't ask why, he did this originally before anyone even told him to. Izzy would find it really cool and goes to talk and compliment Owen as well as play along as a cowgirl. Justin sees this and has a spark in his brain. He realizes he was trying to get Owen to flirt with her like a normal person, but she's a weirdo. To help Owen get with her, he needs to advise Owen to flirt with her like the weirdo she is. For the challenge, the gaffers definitely win as the cowboys. The grips have some people that would make very easily catchable cattle, like Owen puts up no fire running, Lindsay's a klutz and gets caught really quickly when the gaffers turn originally, which doesn't happen now, but shows how bad she was at running. Same thing with Justin, he immediately gave up because he didn't want his body to get damage. Trent and Lashana I do think could do pretty well, and maybe find the spare rope again, fight back like Lashana did with Harold and Duncan, but it doesn't matter how good they are. I don't think there's any world where they're winning a 2v6. Also, this 6 has Beth, who was shown to be really good at lassoing, Izzy, who again wasn't here, but I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if she was good at lassoing because it's exactly in the kind of crazy, weird skill set that I imagine Izzy would be good at. After the challenge, Justin talks with Owen about what he learned with Izzy naturally being appealed to him, and tells him to just be his big, odd self. This advice works wonderfully as Owen goes to approach Izzy as a bounty hunter, ready to take her down, and she plays along with the bit, runs away as an outlaw, and Owen chases her down, with Justin giving him a thumbs up. Lashana grabs onto Gwen's arm and takes her to Trent outside the showers. Gwen and Trent are not very happy to see each other, but Lashana doesn't care, saying they're acting childish, being so competitive, and reminds them they still love each other. Gwen and Trent look at each other with a moment of warmth, and it seems like they make progress towards making up, but seeing as this wound is still very fresh, and the initial problem of Trent not thinking highly of Duncan is still not resolved, the fight would spark up again at the mention of Duncan, and they'd both storm off in their separate directions. This infuriates Lashana even more, as she storms off herself, booing in her anger. Hearing them descend again at the mention of Duncan makes her even more mad at Duncan than she was already for him bullying Harold. She uses this anger and goes to find Duncan. She uses her anger and intimidation skills to threaten Duncan into saying he won't mess with Harold anymore. Duncan senses how serious she is and is thoroughly shook to his core, telling Lashana he promises he won't mess with Harold anymore. Duncan has a confessional saying he won't mess with Harold, but then pulls up his hand to show he's crossing his fingers, and revises it to saying he won't mess with Harold in front of Lashana. Originally, Justin was near the showers to hear about Gwen and Trent breaking up, so he would have been there as well to hear them fighting, and I think because of this, Justin would target Trent. I already think Justin would have wanted to target Trent, as he has easy connections on Lindsay and Owen, so it doesn't make sense to get rid of either of them, and they kind of need Lashana for challenges because their team is going low on numbers. Also, Trent is the leader of the team, so if Justin wants to take control of the team, which he definitely does for his game and ego reasons, his best bet would be eliminating Trent. And because of the fight he heard between him and Gwen, it would be the perfect time to take out Trent while Gwen is still mad at him, so this decision doesn't blow over on Justin later in the game. Justin would worry that if he waits any longer, then Trent and Gwen might be able to make up their issues, and then it wouldn't be as optimal timing. Justin would be able to pretty easily convince Owen and Lindsay to vote for Trent. They both do like Trent, but they like Lashana even more since their only other option, so it wouldn't seem that far-fetched to put their votes on him anyways. But just to seal the deal, he could make up a rumor that Trent and Gwen are just acting like they're mad at each other in the challenges so that everyone thinks they aren't close anymore. Justin just thinks it's probably a ruse to try and lower their suspicion, which Owen and Lindsay would eat up. So in a 3-2 vote, I'm not exactly sure where Lashana and Trent would vote. Maybe Owen because he was already a winner and didn't help that much in the challenge. It doesn't matter because Trent would be eliminated. Trent and Lashana are confused on how this happened, and that's when Owen and Lindsay start giving out to Trent for trying to play the ploy with Gwen to make them think they aren't close anymore. Trent is confused by what they are saying, but when Owen says that they were thick as honey and peanut butter last season, did he really expect them to believe they were getting into fights as leaders? Trent's gaze hits the floor as even though Owen is wrong about what Trent was doing, he realizes Owen is right that him fighting with Gwen like this was petty. Chef throws Trent over his shoulder and begins carrying him to the limo. As this is happening, Trent asks Lashana to tell Gwen he's sorry and offer her his guitar to remember him by. Jeff and Bridget open the aftermath the same way and introduce Heather as their first guest. During this, Jeff acts very cruel of her by asking her hard-hitting questions, dropping heavy things near her when she lies because of the truth or anvil game, some variation of that. It makes fun of her for being tricked by Justin and being bald, which the peanut gallery and the audience all join in on. This is the first look into how the desire to increase ratings is corrupting Jeff, which Bridget asks him if he thinks they're being too cruel, but Jeff reminds Bridget of all the torment Heather put them through and says this is justice. Bridget doesn't seem happy with that reasoning, but naturally agrees that Heather is awful and decides to let it slide. Before they bring out Trent, they talk about the fight between him and Gwen and take sides about who was right, even doing audience polling on a website to encourage the viewers to vote for who they think was in the right. Starts off leaning more towards Gwen. Jeff being close to both Gwen and Duncan would firmly be against Trent because he just doesn't think Duncan is a bad guy at all and thinks Trent was just being controlling and saying that Duncan's influencing Gwen negatively. Bridget doesn't take either of their sides, saying they were both acting childish, actually taking more of Lashana's side on the matter that they just shouldn't have been arguing at all. They invite Trent out, and Jeff flames him extremely hard for the situation, showing clips of Duncan being nice on Island to make Trent feel bad about judging him so quickly. Trent wouldn't repent on not liking Duncan, knowing he's still a massive jerk most of the time, even if he had some nice moments. This doesn't please Jeff, however, going further to mention what Gwen brought up about him kissing Heather last season, putting him in no position to judge Duncan. Heather next to Trent even agrees with the sentiment that he was very easy to manipulate, and the online polling swings extremely in support of Gwen. Bridget, being annoyed at Jeff intentionally putting Trent in the spotlight to shame him, comes to Trent's defense, which I also think she'd do because she actually has a great personal experience that relates to Trent's fear of Duncan corrupting Gwen, pulling up clips from last season where Jeff was nice to Harold, notably in the dodgeball challenge, where even when the whole team didn't want to let Harold compete because he was terrible at dodgeball, Jeff is the one who gave Harold a ball to come back in the game, and then compares it to near the end of the pre-merge where Jeff was working with Duncan to relentlessly bully Harold. I still believe Bridget wouldn't support the way Trent went about it and devolving into childish fighting, but she would understand Trent's concern because Jeff started off as a sweetheart towards Harold, but after spending enough time with Duncan, he fell along with his schemes and became really cruel towards Harold. This compelling evidence makes the poll swing back towards the center, making Jeff unhappy because it being near the center means there's not good enough conflict and it's not good for ratings. So he tries to say that's a ridiculous fear. Jeff obviously hasn't been corrupted. Heather points out that he tried dropping heavy things on her just minutes ago. Jeff begins to see his argument is falling apart, so he quickly closes off the show as people start to boo him from his clear avoidance. The next episode still begins with both genders being locked in their respective trailers. The guys plays out the exact same since they have the same people. Only notable change would be that Duncan would start off the morning bullying Harold awake, having missed out on bully time from avoiding it around Lashana. Gwen still freaks out about the claustrophobia of being trapped in the trailer, to which Lindsay says she's surprised that's the only thing on her mind, considering Trent was eliminated yesterday. Lashana glares at Lindsay, and Lindsay realizes her mistake of breaking the news to Gwen like that. Gwen is extremely hurt, thinking it wouldn't have happened to Trent. Lashana tries to comfort Gwen and inform her about Trent's guitar that he left for her, but Gwen, not wanting to focus on that, pushes away the feelings and just focuses on escaping the trailer. While looking for ways to escape, Beth catches up with Lindsay in private, checking in on how she's been. Lindsay answers a bit dismissively. Beth apologizes to Lindsay that they have to be like this, and Lindsay tells her, no worries, Lindsay gets it now. Beth is relieved, but before she can talk with Lindsay anymore, Lindsay already walks off and finds the vent on the roof of the trailer. Lindsay has a confessional talking about how much it hurt when Beth unfriended her at first, but having Justin by her side made it a lot easier, and when they were stargazing yesterday, Justin called her a shining star, and Pretty on the nose says her star shines so bright she doesn't need any other star around, especially not one named Beth. That made Lindsay believe she is a star, and if Beth is going to ditch her, then it's time for Lindsay to start focusing more on herself. Instead of Gwen having to trick Heather into trying to escape through the vent on the roof of the trailer, Izzy, seeing the opportunity, would quickly insist on being the one to do it, because she'd love to try and go up to those areas. The first challenge begins with Chris telling the teams to pick someone from the other team to be locked up in a cage. It is, however, not made clear yet what that person will be doing. Heather was originally the one to point out how bad Lindsay did being locked up in the showers, but Gwen was able to fully recount the story herself, so even without Heather here, I do think Gwen would still remember how bad Lindsay did, and suggest locking her up. Beth would struggle with this decision since she still does care for Lindsay, and getting the brush off from her would worry Beth about disconnecting them further. Beth also did originally consider that maybe the person you put in the cage actually just gets removed from the challenge, and brings this up to try and get people to go off of putting Lindsay in the cage. The team catches on, thinking Beth is just trying to protect Lindsay, and when that gets thrown around, Beth relents and agrees with the team. Despite the Grips not having blackmail against Gwen in this world, Justin would probably still recommend Gwen since she's known for having claustrophobia and would struggle the most in a confined cage. Lashana wouldn't allow this to happen though, feeling bad enough for Gwen with having to deal with losing Trent. This makes Justin and Lashana butt heads, as Justin questions her loyalty to the team. The fighting would bleed over into Chris asking for their official choice, and with no deliberation, Owen and Lindsay are forced to quickly choose, since their choice would be DJ. Given his large size, they could assume that it would be uncomfortable for him to be cramped in a tiny cage, so he would struggle more. But knowing the challenge, Lindsay's weak stomach, she would definitely throw up before DJ. I do see DJ possibly struggling, but if he was in serious danger of vomiting, he would just sprinkle some of Mama's spice on it, and seeing how when he did that to Lindsay's meal in the original, she thought it was actually delicious, that would definitely give DJ the win, and the gaffers the golden shovel. This would now lead to Chef being proud of DJ for showing the true animal inside him for not being too bothered by the food, feeling happy that his efforts are shaping DJ. DJ feeling motivated from that win, as well as Gwen not unmotivating DJ in the next challenge to try and throw like she did in the original. DJ would be the obvious choice to push with how strong he is, so he'd be the pusher of the cart for the gaffers. Originally, Owen was lazy and made an excuse to ride in the cart instead of pushing it. I'm not sure if he would or wouldn't still do this in this universe. Owen owes one to Justin for helping out with Izzy. I'm not fully confident that that alone would have a strong enough effect, considering how little Justin tried to get Owen to be the pusher in the original. But now that they've been on a losing streak, they kind of need to win, and he doesn't have the ace up his sleeves with Gwen sabotaging for the other team. I do think he'd realize like Owen has to be the pusher because he's the biggest, so they can't have him in the cart because no one can push his weight. And with that on top of Lashana so being here, which is someone I don't think would stand for Owen being this lazy, it's a lot more likely that Owen would either be forced or convinced into pushing for the grips. Seeing that Owen immediately fell asleep when lying in the cart, I don't feel like he'd have a lot of energy to push very well, and definitely not beat DJ to the wall. So the grips stand no chance of digging to the other side before the gaffers coming after them to the wall, 2 less diggers, no golden shovel, and no Gwen sabotage to slow the gaffers down. The gaffers win, and the grips will be going to elimination again. Before the elimination ceremony, Lashana pulls Justin aside to talk. Justin isn't amused and tells her if she's coming to tell him to not vote for Gwen, then she can ease her worries, implying that Lashana cared too much about protecting Gwen today, and he's obviously voting her. Lashana acknowledges he needs to keep her in. They're heading down a bad losing streak, and they both know he won't make it far if he keeps both Owen and Lindsay on the team. She promises she won't let her feelings towards the other team get in the way again, and he knows it's in both their best interests to keep her around. Justin is annoyed, but understands that Lashana is right and he can't afford to lose her, leaving the choice to be between Owen and Lindsay. I went back on this choice a lot, because I think there's a lot of factors to why either of them could go here. Ultimately, based solely on the fact that Justin is already going along with this vote for the best interest of keeping the team strong, Lindsay is probably in trouble. Both Owen and Lindsay are very bad at challenges, but the difference is that I think Owen is probably a little bit better from his performance in season 1. He has these select moments where he's like a powerhouse in the dodgeball challenge. He's the one who lifted up the trailer by himself in this challenge. Like, he has these moments where he's an absolute powerhouse. If it's a eating challenge, he easily wins it for his team. He's definitely a hindrance at times, but I feel like Lindsay's usefulness much less extends from a challenge aspect than what Owen can offer, especially considering Lindsay's most prominent challenge feats, like overall, are from the merge of action, which has not happened yet. We've only gone through the first season. She didn't have a very impressive record in Island. I mean, if it's like a biking challenge, which she did really good at, then, you know, that's something. But that's like one prominent skill set, maybe if it's like a fashion challenge, but she doesn't really have any general skills of strength or agility or intelligence, which most challenges rely on. As for every other aspect, alliance and future longevity in the game, I feel like Owen and Lindsay about counteract each other in Justin's mind at least. Owen is good because he's very loyal to Justin and there's Izzy on the other side when they get to the merge. Lindsay's really good because she really likes Justin and there's Beth on the other side when they get to the merge. Justin has both of them wrapped around his finger pretty well, and he also doesn't really have an emotional connection to either because he's playing both of them. So I do think he'd be more objective than just the fact that Owen is better for challenges and they really need challenge strength right now. The only strong other consideration is the fact that Lashana, I feel like, would want to keep Lindsay because she's had a deeper connection with Lindsay, protecting her from Heather and Island, and Lindsay overcoming that to be against Heather. And I think Lashana would probably assume that, and if they have to go to elimination again, she probably has a better chance of convincing Lindsay to vote for Justin than she would have for Owen voting for Justin. But I don't think it would be Lashana's choice. Like, Lashana's not in a good position here. If she didn't have challenge strength to offer Justin on a team with such lack of challenge strength, she'd just be going this round. So the fact that she's coming to Justin being like, you have to keep me, to just barely stay in this round, puts her in too vulnerable of a position to have any sort of sway in like what Justin actually chooses. If Justin chooses Lindsay, I don't think Lashana would risk opposing that decision and potentially get her name back in the vote. Justin would want Lindsay gone just because of challenge strength. He'd tell Lashana this, probably tell Owen this too, to like switch the vote off of Lashana. And in a free one vote, Lindsay is eliminated. Lindsay would be destroyed as she realizes Justin didn't care about her as much as she thought, to still be able to vote her out, which she never planned on doing to him. Lindsay says to Justin, but she thought she was a shining star. Justin is cold and breaks it to her that sometimes stars fall. He has to focus on the game, and she's not good for his. She's not good for this team's. Lindsay tears up and runs to the limo, throwing herself in. The next episode begins at night when the Grips come back from elimination, and neither gender can get into their trailer. During this, Beth notices the absence of Lindsay, making people realize she must have been voted out. Most people are pretty shocked at this since everybody loves Lindsay, but Justin stops the mushy talk, starting off by saying he cared about her too, but they are on a losing streak and they had to focus on the challenges. While not pleased, people would understand that reasoning and back off, at least in an accusatory tone towards the Grips. Lashana glances at Justin though, and has a confessional, knowing how close Lindsay felt to him. Justin might say it was just a game, but Lashana would never vote off Harold if it meant saving her behind. He knows what he did in manipulating Lindsay to have more numbers. Bev has a confessional, feeling drained and guilty about Lindsay going, continuously thinking about how hurt she made Lindsay feel and wondering if she could have done anything to save her, like fighting against her team more about putting her in the cage because her weak display in the cage, losing them the shovel, could have been part of the reason that Lindsay went. Originally, Lashana didn't bother studying for the challenge because it was known it was a award challenge, so it didn't matter. But now that she's at the bottom of the Grips and got Justin to keep her specifically for being good at challenges, I don't feel like she would give up because that would be a really bad look. Make it look like she almost immediately went back on her word of trying harder in challenges, instead stays with Justin and Owen to study. Duncan also originally gave up studying because Lashana was the one who suggested it, but he's not on her team anymore. I also think Gwen would be a bit obsessive about studying, really wanting the team to win. Duncan notices this and points out it's not like her. Gwen doesn't want to reveal the reason she's mad at the Ever team for voting out Trent and wants them to keep suffering losses, words it in a more strategic manner, explaining that they have a strong advantage over the Grips right now, and falling into a sense of security is how the Grips will win the advantage back. Duncan still doesn't take this seriously, making Gwen become more bossy, insisting that he will study, as will everyone, eventually causing Duncan to relent because he doesn't care enough to fight on it. DJ would still be in the kitchens preparing the pizzas, but since he did well in the previous challenge and stepped up, Chef would be proud of him, thinking he found his confidence, so he gives DJ advice for the challenge to help him out. I don't think he would outright say that the outbreak is going to be fake because that's too risky for DJ to just immediately know, because he might blurt it out by mistake and ruin their whole illegal alliance. Instead, he tells DJ to just be perceptive in the challenge because not everything is what it seems. The first fake half of the challenge would go pretty similar to the original, with both teams answering trivia questions and diving for body parts. The Grips would not stand a chance in this though, because Justin and Owen don't seem like the book smarts type. It doesn't matter though, as Justin would still find a pepperoni on Owen, and then it changes to the real challenge. Everyone would still develop the symptoms of fake diseases, including Lashana and Duncan now because they actually studied. The only person who wouldn't is Beth, because her mind was too focused on Lindsay to retain any of the studying or bother eating much of the pizza. Beth is playing doctor to everyone, feeling awful about the situation, believing the outbreak is karma for her turning her back on Lindsay, and that's why she's being spared, so she's forced to slowly watch all her friends die. DJ is in the quarantine bubble trying to think about what Chef told him and begins connecting the dots of how the symptoms are showing themselves, and Beth being the only one that didn't eat the pizza or study. His reveal of this being a facade wouldn't be as thorough as Duncan's and Lashana's since he wouldn't be able to gather any evidence, but he would pick at his sore realizing it's just a pepperoni and then connect the other dots enough for Chris to come in and award the gaffers for winning the challenge. The gaffers then have to decide the one person that gets to have the reward of having a night out of the camp with their loved one. They probably wouldn't hand it over to DJ as easily as they did Lashana, because this team seemed pretty reluctant to give away the reward until Lashana played up the crying and feeling bad to get their sympathy act. Ultimately, they would most likely end up being given to DJ anyways, as I don't see how they would decide amongst themselves in any other way, except for awarding DJ this because he was the one to figure out the challenge. Only everything I sat with for a bit, maybe Beth for meticulously caring for all of them. Beth is still feeling bad about Lindsay, and even if it is like her family, I don't think she'd want to take that because I don't think she'd believe she deserves it. Just based off how DJ was certain that his mom wouldn't have approved of his cheating, how proud his mom was of him in the aftermath for taking the honorable decision to make up for the cheating, I don't think she would be pleased with him while the cheating is ongoing. DJ excitedly runs out the building and goes into the limo to give his mom a hug. Instead, he's met with a slap to the face. DJ is confused and hurt as his mom explains that she's seen what he's been doing, cheating with Chef. She raised him better than that, and she can't even begin to explain how disappointed she is. She calms down for a second, saying at least you took care of your friends to get the victory. DJ looks guilty, knowing that isn't even remotely true, being as he was the one who unknowingly made them the food that made them feel sick. His mom can detect the shame, and immediately says, "Devin Joseph, I cannot believe you." Chef closes off the show for production chat, while the cameras pick up DJ's mom still scolding him. The episode begins the night after the last challenge in the girls' trailer. The door is slightly creaked open, and some quiet crying can be heard. Gwen wakes up from this and steps outside to see who it is, and discovers Beth sitting on the step to the trailer crying. Gwen feeling bad for her because she has a bigger heart for other people's problems after Island, and also knowing that it's probably about Lindsay being gone, which she relates to because she feels the same way about Trent, sits down next to Beth to comfort her. Beth confesses how awful she's feeling about Lindsay being gone, knowing that she spent her final days here with Lindsay, shunning her best friend. Gwen awkwardly pats Beth's back, trying to comfort her, and tells Beth that she's sure Lindsay forgives her for it. Beth isn't fully convinced, saying Gwen can't know that. Gwen wants to help Beth and also get it off her chest anyways, so she confides in Beth that she doesn't, but she wants to believe the same, telling Beth all about how her and Trent weren't on great terms when he got eliminated, and it's been bugging her the same way. Beth feels comforted knowing that Gwen understands her struggle. She pulls Gwen into a hug and thanks her for coming out to make her feel better. Gwen is stunned by the hug, but slowly sinks into it as she needed one for Trent as well. and lightly hugs Beth back. DJ arrives back from his award of his mom, and just like the original, except even more so after having the whole night with his mom to set him straight, he wants to cut off the cheating with Chef, which Chef promptly dismisses. Chris explains the challenge, and each team has to choose their killer. The gaffers will have DJ forced upon them by Chef, despite Duncan and Izzy being good choices. The group's choice is obviously Lashana. Justin originally wanted to be the killer to protect his face with the mask, but because they're on a miserable losing streak, I think he would be taking the challenges more seriously, knows that Lashana is above and beyond the best for the job. The first people on their team that the scarers have to get in the forest would be Justin for the grips and Harold for the gaffers, because that's the two who were originally here. DJ argues with Chef before going out to scare Harold that he's not going to do the scare well, because unlike the original, doing well with the previous challenges is what's making him feel bad about cheating. Chef tells DJ that he will win no matter what, and if he chooses to make it harder for them, Chef has to interfere more. So if he wants to avoid taking Chef's help, then he has to do well on his own, and then it's like he's not even cheating. DJ has a confessional, realizing Chef is right. If he does well in the challenges by himself, then he can avoid cheating anymore and play the game respectfully like how Mama would want from him. So he goes out and gets a good scream out of Harold. Lashana tries to scare Justin, but he would still give a half-assed scream to preserve his voice and avoid wrinkles on the face. Because even though he would be taking the challenges more seriously, I don't think he'd take it serious enough to be willing to risk his attractive features for it, giving the gaffers the first point. This annoys Lashana greatly, as the team just had a talk about taking the challenges seriously. Justin doesn't care and says when she gets a face as pretty as his, she'll understand. The next people the scarers would have to scare in the porta potty is Owen for the grips, and Izzy plus Beth for the gaffers. I chose Beth for this spot because she was here originally. Could have been between Gwen and Izzy for the last part, since Izzy was the one in the final part of the challenge originally, but Gwen and Duncan are still very close friends, since they would probably want to be scared together before knowing that it involved. Yeah, we'll get there later. First, for the people being scared in the bathrooms, pretty easily Lashana would be able to get a good scare out of Owen, and even though DJ is trying a lot harder, Beth can't scream because of her surgery mishap that we learned in this episode, and Izzy would be too upset about not being scared to show any other emotion besides annoyance at DJ's attempt, giving this point to the grips. The final people being scared on the couches, instructed to make out, would be Gwen and Duncan for the gaffers, and Justin and Owen for the grips, because they're the only two people left. Gwen and Duncan before reading the script would be confident they could give good performances, since they believe they know every horror movie cliche, so they'll know when the scare is coming and how to ham it up. But as Duncan looks into the script and widens his eyes, he notices they forgot about one cliche, pointing to the part that says they have to kiss. Justin and Owen also come along this part, making Justin disavow the idea, while Owen tries to also disavow with the same distaste. However, he can't help but smile a bit at the idea because Owen showed to have a little boy crush on Justin at times. Duncan and Gwen also say there's no way they're going to do this, since Gwen is still dating Trent, and Duncan explains he prefers having his arms attached to his body, and he's not sure if they still will be if Courtney ever finds this. Both Lashana and DJ give their attempt at scares, but with the team still hung up about not wanting to kiss, neither side gives much a reaction. Chris tells them refusal to follow the script will result in an immediate forfeit for the tiebreaker. Lashana is now getting even more annoyed with Justin's whining of not wanting to follow through in the challenge, as already been prevalent in challenges before, and tells them to just give Owen a peck. Justin still complains, making Lashana take matters into her own hands, grabbing the back of Justin's head and pushing his face into Owen's. Chris looks at the two of them in pain on the ground and says that was more of a headbutt, a violent headbutt. Gwen and Duncan remain firm that no kiss will happen. This means that Chef will interfere now, since the problem isn't DJ not being scary enough, it's Duncan and Gwen not kissing. However, Izzy would still be very annoyed at not being the scarer, and takes a chainsaw to show DJ how it's done, scaring all the gaffers and making DJ pass out again. This results in DJ having the same dream about his mom being disappointed in him for still letting Chef keep him in this illegal alliance, and telling him that Chef only told DJ to try harder on the challenges to prolong their cheating further into the game. DJ wakes up to Chris informing the gaffers that they won since neither team kissed, but they got a larger scream from Izzy. From here the challenge plays out similar to the original. The grips are placed in the tent and told not to leave, the gaffers are the ones told to scare them. Harold creates the first plan with a soccer ball under the blanket to look like a ghost, which Lashana catches onto and debunks. Duncan creates a second of blood dripping from the wall, and Lashana also debunked this one, and then DJ creates the master plan, finally scaring the grips out, and winning the challenge for the gaffers. Only small changes would happen during the challenge, like Lashana and Justin arguing with each other in the crafts tent about Lashana forcing his head into Owen, and maybe having caused a black eye from that. Justin's especially mad at her for ruining his looks. Gwen, Duncan, and even maybe Izzy bonding over the creation of the realistic fake blood. Izzy being ecstatic to finally act as a scarer, taking over Heather's role in DJ's plan. The grips go to elimination, where it looks like Lashana's gonna go, as Justin is too upset about his face being damaged to vote any other way. However, DJ will still sacrifice himself, quitting the competition to make amends for cheating with Chef. Justin, admiring himself in confessional, upset at his bandaged eye from Lashana's forced headbutt to him, as he swears vengeance on her for ruining the only thing that matters. Gwen, having felt encouraged with Beth yesterday, finally heads over to the mail trailer and pulls out Trent's guitar from under his old bunk. She takes a second to just admire it fondly, thinking of Trent, when Beth interrupts from behind. She talks to Gwen briefly about Trent, when Gwen tells her she wants to try playing it to keep memory of Trent. Beth likes the idea and says she's glad Gwen didn't kiss Duncan yesterday, staying loyal to Trent the same way Beth is staying loyal to her boyfriend. This leads to a similar line of questioning from the original about the existence of Beth's perfect boyfriend, just directly with Gwen instead of like an entire group setting, and Gwen just fully doubts Beth's story. The first challenge plays out basically the same, where Owen gets his teeth smashed in from Chef owning a heavy book, giving Justin and Lashana the advantage of the code to the floor vault in the next challenge, but Owen has to be medically evacuated for the rest of the day, upsetting everyone, Izzy especially. Considering all the animosity between Lashana and Justin, they would probably end up fighting over the code like Justin and Lindsay did originally, making it fall into the water and become unreadable. Izzy would still be getting easily annoyed as she's worrying about Owen incessantly, and when Beth mentions her fake boyfriend once, Izzy goes off on her for being obviously fake, and also because the boyfriend talk reminds her of Owen. Lashana forces Justin to try and help her reach the top hatch, but he drops her in the water before she's able to reach the top hatch, making her hair get wet and turn into an afro. Justin snickers at the sight, making Lashana tackle him to fight underwater. The gaffers wait for the water to rise so they can reach the top hatch by Duncan's suggestion, and when Gwen pulls it down and almost gets charred by the fire, she pulls away scared and hugs into Duncan's arms. I'm not a fan of Gwenkin, but there was obviously some attraction there before, and in a life or death situation, I do think that Gwen wouldn't be appalled by that kind of physical comfort. I don't see it as a romantic thing, they both still have partners, just more of a friends comforting each other as they think they might die sort of thing. Justin and Lashana are scratched up from their fighting as the water continues to rise. They fear for their lives and have no more energy to keep fighting. Lashana, like the original, even begins to tear at the idea of dying, making Justin scared too. They stop their bickering and hug each other to offer comfort in their last moments. Harold still saves the day though by using his bendy straws, winning the challenge for the gaffers. The episode ends with the gaffers getting the reward, and Owen being allowed to share it if he promises not to sue, which he does, because it was chips and soda and he likes food because he's fat. Joke, haha. Izzy goes over to check in on Owen and help him blend up the food reward so he can enjoy it like the original. The episode still begins with a line forming for the bathroom, which Lashana gets to first, since her and Justin made up a little bit from yesterday and also just understand more that they need to work together to finally win. Lashana offers up her spot to Justin, leading to them both having confessionals, explaining that they forgave each other for now, as it's obvious it's still a rickety alliance because they need each other. They're at least now understanding fully that they do have to work together and they have to put whatever problems they have aside if they don't want to keep losing. Justin opens a stall door to still find Owen struggling because of his food consumption from the broken jaw, leading to a blockage. Chef comes in with a smoothie to help digestion, and unfortunately, I still see Lashana chugging it because the reason she gave for doing so was that she missed DJ's cooking, and because he's gone, she still would miss it. Yeah, we'll deal with that later. Gwen is practicing Trent's guitar outside the cabin, but since she's never had any experience that at least we know of, it doesn't sound great, and people around like Duncan comment on wishing to be hard of hearing. Duncan and Harold still bicker once the challenge is revealed, both wanting to take charge, making Harold show his yo-yo skills that Duncan interferes with to make one hit his crotch. Duncan, Gwen, and Izzy laugh at the scene while walking off. Beth stays back to help out Harold. Following this, she has a confessional, displeased with Duncan for his bullying because she's nice, so she obviously wouldn't like bullying, and has seen it enough times towards Harold to pick up on what Duncan's doing. I also think now that Beth has processed Lindsay being gone more, she would remember that Duncan was the one who told her to separate from Lindsay, would still hold a bit of a grudge for that. For the controlled pain explosion part of the challenge, I feel like the gaffers definitely have it. Duncan is easily the best at this, single-handedly winning this for whatever team he usually ends up on. I think it's very likely that Izzy/Explosivo would interfere with the explosion to make a massive explosion. I'm not sure the Grips would even be able to make some sort of explosion. Owen would probably be too lazy to help. Lashana begins to feel the effects of the smoothie, making her not too helpful and also distracting the team as they talk about that. I'd be willing to bet Justin has zero knowledge on explosives, nor the intelligence to set it up properly for a blast. Therefore, Chris awards a treasure chest to protect to the gaffers. Duncan and Harold still disagree on what to focus on, with Duncan wanting to create booby traps, and Harold suggesting for the team to dig out a hole to hide the chest in. Gwen would join Duncan on making booby traps since they are good friends, and Beth would help out Harold to assist his ideas against Duncan. There isn't direct dissension with Gwen and Beth's friendship from this differing in choices, but they do give each other a look of disappointment, showing that it was noticed by both sides. Izzy is a wild card, so I'm not sure who of these sides she would help, but I could also just see her running off on her own to spy on the other team to try and get enemy intel, as it seems really in line for her character to act as a secret ops like investigator, and would also give her the excuse to check in on Owen, who she's still probably really worried about from hurting himself. There wouldn't be much successful strategy for her to snoop in on though, as the Grips would not have any structure for any plan attack. Lashana starts to fully actualize the effects from the drink she chugged, forcing Justin to take control, who he's definitely not like any sort of intelligent battle strategist, and he's probably aware of this, so he thinks it'll be a better move if he goes in and tries to allure the girls on the other team into handing him the chest with his amazing good looks. He has Owen come with him, probably just like carry the chest, but this proves extremely unsuccessful. He walks to the area confused first off about them hiding underground and not knowing where they went like the original. He still attempts the whole facade of flirting, which doesn't work since he for some reason lost his charm this episode anyways. I don't really know why, it wasn't explained well, it was just that he couldn't manipulate Beth and Lindsay anymore, so whatever it was he had that had this amazing charm towards women to manipulate them, he just doesn't have it this episode. Instead, him and Owen get kicked into a snare trap set up by Duncan and Gwen. They both fist bump when the trap works successfully. Justin and Owen fly back towards Lashana when Justin becomes worried at how much better prepared the other team is. Izzy scales down the tree to make sure Owen is okay since she's already been worried about him since he broke his jaw. The Grips realize that Izzy was spying on them from this. Instead of being angry about it, however, Justin sees the opportunity to give their team a chance to win. He explains the odds they find stacked against them and suggests to Izzy that she act as their turncoat. Izzy could have some quarrels about this because I do think she'd adopt into the spiral obsessively like how she does with all her roles of Explosivo and things like that, and therefore the idea of committing treason sounds vile. She's also a natural agent of chaos that's really close to Owen and knows that if the Grips keep losing, it's only a matter of time before he goes next. In fact, he could even be the next one to go because he has his jaw wired and he's injured. And just to seal the deal, Justin would offer her the rest of their paint bombs that they never got to use in the first part, leaving Izzy excited to fulfill Explosivo's needs. Izzy is now fully on board and has a confessional excited to play the part, and even uses some lipstick to paint the Grips team symbol on the back of her shirt to signify her becoming a turncoat. Izzy goes back to her team, feeding them a lie that the Grips seem to be planning an intense invasion, so they need to focus on preparing. She stays in the underground bunker with Harold and Beth, and while doing so, she digs out a secret exit in case they need to catch up with the Grips leaving their base, but it's actually just a trick for her to sneak in paint bombs when the time is right. Beth and Harold complaining about Duncan gives Izzy the idea to fan flames to the fire and lie about Duncan calling Harold useless and completely pathetic for a soldier. This upsets Harold even more, as the main gripe in this episode was that Duncan doesn't respect him. Next, Izzy travels with Gwen and Duncan to set up more traps, and while doing so, she intentionally breaks them so they won't set off correctly, and continues to egg the rivalry of Duncan and Harold by feeding Duncan lies about Harold, saying that he said Duncan is reckless and he needs Courtney to whip him into place like she always does. Duncan becomes infuriated by the nerve of Harold to have Courtney's name in his mouth and charges the base to confront him. Seeing this, Izzy gives the symbol towards the Grips to attack. Duncan and Harold confront each other aggressively as Gwen and Beth try to break them up. With the team fully distracted, Izzy pulls in the paint bombs from her tunnel and the Grips enter the hole. Grips are wearing gas masks and most likely use Lashana's stomach issues to create a distraction for Justin and Owen to run through and take the chest. The gaffers take notice and try to follow them, but the paint bombs go off, slowing them down even further. The Grips are able to bring the chest back to their area and celebrate finally breaking their losing streak. The gaffers covered in paint all start to crawl out the hole, while Duncan scolds Harold for his stupid plan to create an underground bunker because it just created a confined space for the other team to use against them. Harold notices that one of Duncan's traps didn't go off and begins arguing back with him about his methods, since he couldn't even make a simple trap set-off measure. The conflict now makes Beth and Gwen get involved on their respective sides. Izzy grins as her plan to throw and not get caught worked. For the vote, firstly, it's important to consider if Izzy would get caught sabotaging, because if she does, then she'd clearly go here. I don't believe there's enough for anyone to catch her on, and especially with all the emotional conflict on the team, everyone would be too upset to rationally find a way to connect Izzy to the failures. And based on that not happening, Duncan and Harold will vote for each other because the conflict has been boiling for a long time and has reached its climax in this challenge. Beth and Gwen is rough, do still feel a strong connection to each other, but Gwen is also way too close to Duncan to even consider voting for him, so she votes Harold to help defend him, and Beth is probably still too anti-Duncan to not vote him, leaving Izzy in the middle. She has no strong connection to either Harold or Duncan, so I feel like the only thing she could base this choice on is challenge strength. And usually between Harold and Duncan, that would probably lean to keeping Duncan instead. Even though Harold is really good at challenges sometimes, Duncan is definitely consistently better at challenges. Although Izzy is trying to throw challenges to keep the Grips from going to elimination. That was the gimmick for today, but I also think she'd still want to keep Owen safe, so she'd probably still want to continue sabotaging. Meaning, if she perceives Duncan as better for the challenges, that's actually a better reason for her to want to get rid of him, so she'll have an easier time throwing the challenges, because with a less strong team, it's easier to make it look like they're messing up instead of someone's here interfering with it all. And that was very evidently in how experienced he was with the traps and the wartime knowledge and the paint bombs in this episode. In a 3-2 vote, Duncan is eliminated. Duncan is annoyed by this as Harold takes the moment to rub it in with a lengthy speech about how he bested him with honor, but Duncan quickly pushes him over and off the bleachers as Harold begins the speech. Gwen follows Duncan to walk him out. She has a sarcastic jab saying she'll miss seeing his obscenities carved into the trees around here, and Duncan gives one back saying he'll miss the screeching sounds of hell crawling its way back onto Earth when she's practicing the guitar. They both smile at each other, knowing it's just playful, and give a final fist bump before Duncan walks into the limo. The aftermath opens the same, and Lindsay is the first guest. She's asked the general questions about being eliminated and such, and this is used as a segue to talk about Justin, playing with her feelings, and the other contestants giving their opinions on Justin's devious gameplay as a whole, and most recently involving convincing Izzy to turn on her own team. Most people feel disgusted with how he's playing, notably Noah since he never trusted his good looks, Katie and Sadie who have sympathy for Lindsay, and Bridget overall doesn't like the male manipulator stuff. Some like Ezekiel and Courtney, however, respect him for their strong gameplay and remind people that he eliminated Heather, so he can't be all bad, prompting a scoff out of aforementioned Heather. I'm actually going to bring them all up here. Jeff notices Tyler feels uncomfortable when asked about it, since he obviously has mixed feelings about Justin for hurting Lindsay, but also Lindsay who let Justin flirt with him when Tyler and Lindsay were a thing last season. So Jeff, wanting to take advantage of that drama, starts to grill Lindsay about letting herself off with Justin when Tyler still cared for her. Lindsay is confused since she forgot Tyler was still around, but then when she realizes he's on the other couch, she immediately runs over and tackles him to the ground in a hug. Everyone is now confused as Jeff questions Lindsay. Lindsay tells them that everyone kept telling her that Tyler wasn't there when she was in the game, so she thought he disappeared forever by moving to Polands or something. Cringes as he waits for the anvil to fall, thinking it was an obvious lie, but it doesn't fall. This confusion endears the audience to Lindsay's mistake, and Tyler forgives her since he understands that she does really care for him. Jeff is a bit sour about the drama being resolved nicely, but isn't too upset as there's more opportunity for drama, leading them to inviting out DJ. He basically has the same interview where Jeff tries to guilt him for working with Chef, but with some better success since DJ was actually benefiting from the cheating in this universe. But it still boils over positively for DJ when certain clips of him being cocky and confessional are revealed to be staged by Chef. In the introduction of Duncan before he's brought out, Jeff talks about the last aftermath and actually decides to apologize and repent on his original defense of Duncan. Bridget thinks this is a kind gesture. It's clear that it's just a method for Jeff to switch sides because he got so much flack last time, and he wants to flame Duncan now instead. So he saw with Gwen he wasn't afraid to flame people he was good friends with for the ratings, complete switch of sides, and being done against his good friend fully show how far Jeff has fallen to appeal to the ratings. Most questions are targeted about Gwen to frame Duncan in a poor light, suggesting he's the reason that her and Trent had the big fight, and they must be a little closer than friends, with the various clips he pulls up of them getting along. Courtney fumes at the notion from the other couch. Duncan strongly opposes the suggestion, insisting they are just good friends. Bridget comes to Duncan and Gwen's defense when she mentions how much Gwen has been struggling with Trent being gone, pulling up the clips of Gwen trying to practice Trent's guitar. Jeff can tell he's losing the audience, so he shows the never seen before clip where Duncan gushes at Gwen about Courtney looking to the stars, then leading to the slightly flirty moment when they both fall to the ground with one on top of the other. Duncan begins to lose the aggressive fire to argue back with Jeff now, as the audience seems to turn on him, and Courtney's seething rage from the upper side of the room is scaring him too much to say anything. Jeff brings out the dunk chair of piranhas like he tried to get Gwen to go on, now trying to get Duncan to. Duncan is about to walk over and follow through, when surprisingly, Trent comes to his defense. Trent still doesn't like Duncan, but having had all the time to cool down and being the cool guy he is, he trusts Gwen and knows that her and Duncan don't have anything romantic going on. Also, Trent being in the hot seat last time knows what Jeff is trying to do. He doesn't want to let it happen to Duncan. Trent even thanks Duncan for being a true friend to Gwen and helping her not struggle so much after how much of a jerk Trent was to leave her in a bad mood. Duncan is thankful for Trent's assist and reassures Trent that it's okay, Gwen is thinking about him a lot, and they're probably getting even of how much Gwen is rooting the image of his guitar from her horrible playing. Seeing Duncan and Trent not really become friends, but bury the hatchet towards each other, enters the audience and stops the conflict, much to Jeff's annoyance. And the show closes out a similar way, with an anonymous question coming in that was actually from Bridget, asking what they're supposed to do when your partner is becoming this terrible person you don't recognize. That was the first part of What If Trent Wasn't Derailed in Action. Sorry this took so long to come out. Finals were killing me this semester. I don't really know how to feel about this What If yet. I think it's going to be really dependent on how part 2 goes and like if these certain things that happen have a worthwhile payoff. Losing Lindsay and Duncan so early into the game is definitely a bit rough, but I also think it's kind of exciting because they're two characters that I think are extremely well positioned on their original teams in action. Like, I don't see many universes where Lindsay and Duncan could go early. It's kind of fun to explore a world where they do go and see how that potentially changes stuff, but it's also big losses for the story because they're two really good characters in the season. In a similar vein with Lindsay being gone, I'm excited to work with Beth as a more individual character. People and myself definitely feel a little iffy about Beth being a finalist because her story always kind of felt like it was attached to Lindsay by the hip. She never really had anything super substantial for herself. The only thing you could point to is the fake boyfriend plotline, but even then that wasn't really for Beth. Like, it was more of a plot device to make other characters more entertaining. We were drawn to like the humorous ways that Lashana and Izzy and Heather reacted to Beth saying she had a boyfriend in a world where she doesn't feel like an afterthought to everyone's plotlines. I think could be very interesting. It definitely is a little bumming for Trent that he still goes out very early. I mean, this is a what if basically perfectly designed for Trent to remove all his faults in action to be set up for an actual deep run where he's not a complete weirdo. I feel like Trent was never really gonna be well positioned in action the second he was forced to be a team captain because his closest ally is Gwen. So ideally he should be on a team with Gwen if he wants to be able to make a deep run, because he doesn't have a ton of super strong allies outside of Gwen. He does have people that like him, like Owen and Lindsay are people who like him who would be allies to him, but they're stronger to other people like Justin. It doesn't really matter how close Trent is to these people that he's like sort of allies with when there's other people on the same team. Trent is always kind of in a shitty position to go when we're looking at action, unfortunately. I also feel a little weird about how I handle him and Gwen fighting in the beach episode. I really considered like delaying that because I do feel like it was something that was kind of inevitable with Gwen being close to Duncan and Trent having a really bad perception of Duncan. I'm not quite sure that would happen that soon. Like, it'd only been 3 episodes since Gwen and Duncan were super getting along. I feel like maybe it should have taken a little bit longer for a chillax version of Trent to be upset about that. But it's also like Trent would have gone in that round anyways because Justin still would have wanted to remove him as a leader and he was too close to Owen and Lindsay as allies and LaShawn was good for challenge strength. The fact that Trent was going to go pretty soon anyways, I don't feel as bad about it unfolding in the beach episode because it would have either unfolded there or it just didn't unfold at all, which would have been even more lame. And it's not like Gwen and Trent's conflict was mostly to do with Duncan. Duncan was just kind of the stem to it all, but that stem is what led to the other conflicts of Gwen defending Duncan in an aspect of like defending her team and making fun of Trent, which led to them fighting as leaders, and it led to Gwen making the comment about Heather, making Trent upset about that part. What happened last season is still prevalent in my mind, so it's not like Duncan is like the one and only cause, it's just that he was the root of all the other things that came. Thank you for watching. Bye.